Hi, I'm the Naked Fairy, and today I'm also a sick fairy, complete with my very own flu virus, and also without my hair done, fresh from a nice steamy shower so I could breathe, without any makeup, just one of my bright pair of glasses and some of my happier rings to remind me that even when I feel like crap, it's still a good life. But I had a choice to make. I could do today's video, or I could do today's makeup. And so you are really getting the Super Naked Fairy today, because I have a story I want to tell you. This is a story that took place long, long ago in a land far, far away. It's a story about a rich and powerful man. He had lots of land. He had lots of wealth. He had many knights. He had soldiers. He had lots of allies. And he looked around and he thought, I want more. But then he looked around objectively and he realized that the king in his land was not going to give him more. The lords around him, he couldn't defeat them. And of course you don't steal land from your allies, or you just have more enemies. So instead, he looked across the sea and he sent out people to gather information, and he found out in the kingdom across the sea, a very different kingdom, a different culture, a different language. But this kingdom had a weak king. And so this very powerful lord, he thought to himself, I'm going to take my men and I'm going to go over there and I'm going to get myself some land. In fact, might even take a whole country. So he did. Built boats, went over, fought a mighty battle, and he won. He beat the king, buried him in an obscure spot, so people couldn't make pilgrimages there. He gave the local lands to the people who were faithful to him, to the people who had helped him win this new land. And they went forth and they married amongst the people, and they brought a new culture to this land. In the beginning, the wealthy noblemen that settled in the land and the new king, they spoke one language, and the people of the land spoke another. But over the years, the language trickled down into a language that they now call English. Because the land that the powerful lord came from, it was France, and he was invading England. Now, if you learned this story in history class, you probably didn't learn a story. You probably learned a set of facts. In 1066, William the Conqueror invaded England, and he beat Harold at Hastings. And it was the last time in history that England was successfully invaded. Now, that's an important set of facts for a lot of reasons, not the least of which is its impact on the English language, which now has a lot of French roots because of William being French. It changed the culture of the land subtly and over time. It's actually a really big story as history goes, in the history of that land. And because my ancestors come from that land, in fact, one of my ancestors was actually with William the Conqueror and was awarded land in Ireland, and hence the Irish part of my family tree. It's a story that's really big in my life, but it's an important story. But again, in school you probably didn't hear the story, you probably just heard a set of facts. Now, I love history, and I love a good story. The genre almost doesn't matter. I love a good story. I love a good tale. I like action and adventure. I like slaying the beasts, and I like fighting. I like romance. I like comedy. I like a good laugh. Of course, some parts of the story get lost in history. We don't know. Harold could have been wickedly funny. William could have been so dull and boring that he put his wife to sleep every night at the dinner table. But we don't know, because what we got down is the facts. More and more historians and scientists are realizing that the story is important too, and they're going back and they're learning, they're researching, and they're learning more of the stories. But I didn't really appreciate the difference between facts and a story until I was homeschooling one of my daughters. And when she went back to public school, she was getting T's in history. A D. Now, she's a really smart girl. And she loved history when I taught it to her. And I said, "Sweetie, what happened? I don't understand." And she said, "Mom, it's so boring." And I said, "But you always loved history when I taught you." And she said, "But Mom, you told me stories." They don't tell stories. They just want us to memorize stuff. See, all of life is a story, and our lives, each individual life, is a gigantic story. Think Lord of the Rings extended edition times 1,000. And that's your life, and your life is filled with lots of little stories. And as I mentioned in my very first video, they are stories with lots of different genres. You can't just look at a life and go, it's a tragedy. It might have tragedy in it, and odds are it does. Because, once again, life's hard. But life's also funny. So there's also comedy in it. And there's drama, and there's romance, and there's conflict. There's great alliances, and there's great enemies. Of course, the definition of great kind of depends upon your scope. A great ally of mine really doesn't flip on anybody else's radar, but they're great in my life. See, our stories are more than facts. And the reason I bring this up again is because I've talked about now in the last 2 videos that people are complex. And we're not the only person in our story. Not only am I complex, but the individuals in my stories are complex. But also, I have emotions, complicated, contradictory emotions, and the people in my story, or the characters, they have emotions too. And that's not even half the picture. You see, I'm 53 now, going to be 54 soon, and my emotions are a lot different now than they were when I was 6, or when I was 10, or when I was 15. Because as we grow, as our world expands, our emotions hopefully grow with us. So we're going to be talking about emotions and a lot of the differences between how a child feels, how I felt as a child, and then putting that in a more objective context. Just to give you a really brief example, babies, they are the world. If they don't see it, it doesn't exist. It's why when you play peekaboo, a baby's delighted, because you're disappearing and reappearing. When you go like this to the baby, you're completely gone. And when you go peekaboo, you've suddenly popped back into existence. As that child gets older, their awareness expands, and they become aware of more. One of the first things they become aware of are their hands. And you'll see babies just looking at their hands. They don't quite understand yet its relationship to its body, but it'll look at it, and it'll taste it, because you got to taste everything. And gradually that baby's awareness gets bigger, and the first thing they become aware of are their parents. And the parents, or whether they're the people that gave birth to you or the people that raised you, your parents, and then growing your family outward, they become the first characters in your story. And they're really, really important. In fact, they're so important that in the beginning, your parents are like God. They are all-knowing, they are all-powerful, and they're everywhere. And part of understanding and growing past our childhood feelings and the events of our childhood is understanding how that relationship changes and grows and how we grow. And so when we start out, this is our world. Everything in here is our world. And as we get older, this is where our world continues to be. But we become aware that outside of this area is a bigger world. See, as a baby, as a toddler, out of sight was literally out of mind. But as an adult, I know things actually exist just because I can't see them. I've never been to Moscow. But just because I haven't experienced it doesn't mean it's not real. It's still there. When somebody tells me a fact, I don't even have to believe it. I don't have to believe in gravity. I still stick to the earth. I don't have to believe that the sun will rise tomorrow. But odds are the sun's going to rise tomorrow. We act as if in regards to a lot of things, facts, emotions. And it's important that we learn to distinguish between what's inside our bubble and what's outside our bubble, between what we experience and feel and a bigger, objective world, because our story is both. And so, just kind of wanted to spend this time reminding you again that just like my life is more than facts, it's also more than feelings, and it's more than people. It's a great big mixture, a great big messy mixture. We don't get a script in advance. We don't have our own lighting crew. We don't have directors, and we don't have cameramen. It's us navigating our way through our own story and interacting with the stories of other people. So we're going to continue to talk about emotions, and especially a really big thing called PTSD. And because PTSD is when you get trapped in an experience with great, big, huge feelings. And when you pop back into that moment. And understanding PTSD and understanding how we reacted as children and how we can reframe those feelings as adults is a critical part of growing into happiness and growing into fullness. So I'm going to keep sharing my story with you, and I'm sure that for the next week I'm going to continue to be a sick and even more naked fairy than usual. But not only is my story important to tell you for my sake, but there's still too many people out there that don't know. It gets better. It gets better. Just like my cold is going to get better, because no matter how many times I look at my family and go, just shoot me, I don't mean it. I know it's going to get better. But when you're trapped in the PTSD, when you're trapped in the feelings, when you're trapped in the experiences of trauma, of abuse, of battle, when you're trapped and you feel stuck, you can't see that it gets better. So it does. And whether you're walking along your journey, you're still struggling to get out of a hole, or you've just fallen back into one, wherever you are in your particular story, always remember, clothing is optional, but consent is not.